What's going on, everybody? You're tuned in to Off the Yard. I'm Big Lance. Today, we're talking about things that they would sell on the commissary that would hurt you, that could be used as a weapon, that could be used to kill or maim. In this episode, we're going to talk about a man who had been locked down most of his life, 30 plus years. And a lot of times the younger generation and the older generation will clash. And when they clash, it can get ugly. Let's get into it.
Gladiator game. I'm Big Lance. Tuned in to all the gladiator game. I'm Big Lance. Tuned in to all the gladiator game. I'm Big Lance.
Before we jump into the story, I want to say a couple things. First of all, thank you, Gladiator Gang, Blue Collar Kings. Thank you, the Off the Yard team, for getting us to 25K. I never thought we'd make it here, to be honest, man. I remember when the channel kind of died, and I thought YouTube was over. But it's not. That is apparent. Second of all, make sure you go to Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Check out my story that just dropped tonight at 7 o'clock. That being said, there comes a point in time when generations are going to clash in the penitentiary. You got guys that have been down for 20, 30, 40 years, and you got new guys that are coming in that are 18, 19, 20-ish, that are still kids mentally and emotionally. And you would be surprised that a 19-year-old kid that's got 80 plus years, ain't never going home, is running around playing. When I first started doing time in the 90s, the penitentiary was full of men. Men that had honor, men that were disciplined, men that lived to a certain standard. Today's convicts are anything but that. Today, it's kiki ha-ha all the time. It's always a game. It's always playing. It's always beating on shit. It's always making noise. This is the noisy generation. There was an old head named Fred, man. Old head named Fred, bars. There's an old head named Fred that I was locked up with. And he was incarcerated for a double homicide that was committed in the 80s. He'd been down this whole time. He hadn't been home. This was about 2015 when this happened. No, I'm sorry. 2006. Fred had a job in the enterprise shop, and he took this job very seriously. He came home, or to his cell, his home, would go to the shower, get himself together, and sit in his cell and watch TV for the rest of the night. This is what the man did. He was up at 5 a.m. drinking his cup of coffee, watching the news about a world that he would never see again. I felt bad for Fred because he wasn't a bad dude. Made some mistakes. Made some big mistakes. And if he was to be let out of prison, he probably wouldn't have done anything bad ever again. That being said, though, that's not how the cookie crumbles in the penitentiary. The Department of Corrections does not care if you are rehabilitated. It does not care if you're sorry. You don't get to go back to court and say, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. And they let you go. It's a man's world. Unfortunately, sometimes when you have the older generation, they are forced to live with a younger cat who is maybe a gangbanger or just rowdy in general. And this is one of those particular times. Fred Selly got transferred. He was getting out. He had lived with this dude, the same man, for like 10 plus years. They knew how to live together. They were both old head convicts. But the one guy was going home. Fred was happy to see the man go home, but it hurt him because that was his buddy. That was his friend. And when you have somebody in prison that you kick it with on a regular basis and you become friends, although you do want to see him go home, you hate to see him leave because you're going to wake up tomorrow and that man is going to be gone. Your whole life has changed. they put in this little young 20 plus, maybe 1 or 2 year old kid who had a shit of time. He was a gangbanger. He was loud. He was obnoxious. He had to be heard at all times. He would scream out the doors in the middle of the night. He'd be up early beating on the tables. This was not a convict. This was an inmate at best. Everybody knew that it was going to end up bad for this young man, or Fred, one or the other. Over the next couple of weeks, you could see the irritation in Fred's behavior. You could tell that he was not feeling this shit. He was talking to a couple of the older guys, and you'd hear him when they'd walk on the track, and he'd say, man, this little young dude, man, he keeps pushing my buttons. He's disrespectful. He pisses on the toilet. He spits in the sink. He's nasty. He doesn't shower or wash his clothes. Comes in off the rec yard and lays in the bed with his funky-ass body. Mommy and daddy were still sending him money, so he would just eat crap all day and fart and shit and make the cell smell like ass. And while Fred would be at work, he'd have all his little gangbanging homeboys up in the cell. Fred come home from work one day and say, hey, bro, this is unacceptable, man. There's a certain level of respect that you should have with one another when you live in a cell together. I told a story that's very similar to this about myself. The kid basically told him, fuck you. I don't care what you got to say, old man. You're not going to tell me what to do. This is my cell. One thing about Fred, though, he had connections, man. Fred could get whatever he wanted. At this point in time, they had stopped selling certain things on commissary, but some of the older heads still had some of it laying around. Fred was a smaller guy. He was an old man, little old white man. He had no wins against this man. He could not whip this kid's ass. If he pulled a knife on him, he'd probably get hurt. That's how old he was. The penitentiary had broke this man down, broke his body down, broke his spirit down, broke him down, period. I watched Fred for a while. I even talked to him a little bit, and I was like, I could tell that he was frustrated. I could tell that he was just ready to take care of business. Well, that's his business. It wasn't on me to warn anybody or tell anybody, or I stayed the fuck out of it. I'll never forget it. Standing at the microwave one night. Usually at nighttime, there's a line for the microwave. Everybody wants to cook their bowl shot of their pizza. Everyone's coming out with their pizza board. I don't know if you've ever heard what a pizza board is, but a pizza board is basically like a clipboard or something of that nature that you design and make your own, signify it with your own touch, and you will spread out your pizza dough and you will use it to go into the microwave. Fred usually wasn't out in the pizza line. Fred didn't do that. He would eat the trays, and he had been even doing this so long, he was done with bowl shots and things of that nature. He would eat his crackers and drink his Pepsi every night, watch his shows, and go to bed. Unfortunately, here lately, though, he had a young man at the door screaming. Well, unfortunately, this little young boy was also what we call a gunner. And I'm sure you've heard this term before, man. A gunner is an individual who will stand at the door and jerk his weenus to the females as they walk by or as they sit in the booth. Fred's cell was close to the booth. He was in 2 cells, so there's pretty much a straight shot. Now, some of these little young girls come into these penitentiaries and work, and they're hot in the ass. All they want to see is some penis. Or they're not very attractive, and they're getting the attention. They're not getting it home, so they allow it to happen. Dudes will cut the shower open and get it in, looking at them and shit. It's a very weird situation, man. I never got into it. It ain't my thing. People like it. Well, this young boy was in the cell with Fred while Fred was asleep, pulled his Johnson out and was jerking it at the door, grunting and making noise. Very, very disrespectful, and Fred had had enough. Fred's from the old school. He was in a place called The Walls down here in Richmond. Spring Street. He was a killer. He was not somebody that you play with. Just because somebody is kind of nerdy looking or somebody is not the biggest, baddest dude doesn't mean that they will not stab the shit out of you or hurt you. There's a reason that man is doing his whole life in prison. There's a reason why he's quiet and stays a fuck to himself. Brad's in the microwave line, and I thought he was heating up water. He had a bowl, and he's standing there, and he ain't saying nothing. The young man is sitting at this, so they have tables that sit in front of the television. He's sitting on the table, which is another no-no, because we eat on those tables. We don't want your stinking funky ass right there where we eat our food and drink our coffee. This kid was very disrespectful and deserved everything that happened to him, in my opinion. He thought he was invincible because of his gang. He thought he was just tough shit because he thought he could push this old man around, which he was pretty much doing in a sense. But every dog has a day. Brett took that bowl and put it in the microwave and put it on 3 minutes. 3 minutes in an industrial microwave, you got boiling something, whatever it is that you got in there. I saw him as the microwave was running. He walked over to his very good friend of his, and he kind of whispered something to his ear. He shook his hand, and he gave him a hug. That don't mean nothing. We do that all the time. What's up, dog? Give each other a hug. He embraced his friend, put his arm around him, stuck his head in his shoulder, and you could tell it was a homeboy hug. Microwave goes off. Fred pulls out his bowl of scalding what I thought was water, walks directly over to this young man and douses him right in his goddamn face with it. And the boy started, I've never heard a scream like this in my life. When you hear a grown man scream in terror, agony, pain, like you've never, in fear. Because when he went to reach his face, he wiped down and his face came with it. He was literally pulling his face off. I'm standing there in complete fucking shock, but I could smell it. It's a distinct smell of baby oil. What a lot of people don't know is that you heat baby oil up, it becomes a skin replacement, I guess you would call it. But when you go, it basically sears into your skin, into your pores, and will take your face right off of your skull. I saw the inside of that kid's face. I saw the outline of his eyes. I saw the bridge of his nose. I saw the tendons scalding and sizzling. You could smell the flesh being burned. His homeboys didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, the man, this homeboy that Fred had hugged, pulls out a goddamn lawnmower blade. Pretty much. A good 8-inch banger. And just went right at him. He wasn't no much different than Fred. Probably about 60-some years old. But these men had been doing time together since the 80s. They were boys. They were brothers, man. They would die for each other. That's what real loyalty is. That's what you guys out here don't understand. A lot of people like to joke and clown us because we tell these prison stories and think that we're just comical. But that's the type of shit that we saw on a daily basis. And those are the type of men we were around. The type of men some of us are. I watched that boy's face peel off down his neck. It kind of got into his shoulder. I mean, the more it dripped, the more it took. It's an oil. They locked the pod down. In comes medical. The nurses looking at us, like looking at the COs and us, like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? There's nothing you can do. They're going to end up taking him to the hospital. They're going to take skin off of his ass, and they're going to put it on his face. He's going to be an ass face for the rest of his life. All because he wouldn't shut the fuck up. All because he wouldn't just be respectful. Just because you're in a gang, just because you got some homies does not make you invincible, dog. Or impervious to getting your shit peeled back to the white meat. I promise. I've seen it. I guess if anyone was to take anything from this story, be respectful. You never know what the next man has been through, done, or capable of. We're all capable of something evil inside. It's just a matter of what brings it out. Remember that. Or you might be the one with your face peeling off. Until next time, much love to the Gladiator Gang. Thank you for the 25K. I love you very much, and I appreciate every single one of y'all. Salute to the Blue Collar Kings. And as always, you beautiful, hard-working motherfuckers. Stay up, stay out. Stay sucker free, baby.